Find a Grave is a website which hosts images and information about graves. But for years, the website has come under fire for practices which many deem unethical and immoral, leading to many big names in the genealogy world actively speaking out about the website, one of the largest genealogy podcasts to recently drop Ancestry as a sponsor, and multiple online petitions being signed by hundreds of people. Hello everybody, I am Jarrett Ross, a GeneaVlogger, and on today's video, I will be discussing the curious case of the body counters, the dark side of genealogy. Find a Grave dates back to 1995 when it was started by Jim Tipton. Jim had a hobby of finding and visiting the graves of celebrities. He was surprised that there wasn't anything up online at the time for others who had similar hobbies as him, so he decided to start this website to track what he was doing. He soon found a lot of other people had very similar interests, many where their interests weren't even with famous people, but just in recording graves themselves. So he opened up the website to the public for anyone to add memorials. Find a Grave has become a staple in the genealogy community, but has also become quite useful for many other researchers, building a worldwide community which volunteered to photograph and record memorials. Users were given simple counts on their profile of memorials added, managed, photos added, followers, and more, gamifying the website by encouraging volunteers to increase their numbers. In 2013, Ancestry acquired Find a Grave, which subsequently created an app for the website and then launched a website redesign in 2018, all designed to increase the number of users on Find a Grave and the number of memorials being added to Find a Grave. Yet all that time, there was a major issue brewing under the surface. The gamification of the website had led to some users taking it a little too far, scouring newly published obituaries to add dozens of new memorials a day. This meant that hundreds of new memorials were being added before the burial had even taken place. As this practice increased, it also became ever increasing that loved ones of the recently deceased would stumble upon those listings while still preparing for the burial. And imagine that you just lost a loved one and you're dealing with grief, you're dealing with the logistics of setting up the funeral, you're dealing with the logistics of all this family coming in, you're dealing with all of these different emotions and all of this different stuff going on, basically just trying to function. And then you decide to take a moment in all of this, sit down at the computer and Google their name just to have a quick reminder of some happier times in their life. Maybe find some things that you didn't really know about them that they had done and really just trying to be in a happier place. But then you Google their name and the first thing that pops up, a Find a Grave memorial created by some stranger who they didn't know, and they aren't even buried yet. For many, that would be absolutely horrifying and disgusting. But unfortunately, that is exactly what happened to many people. And it's also not that uncommon that a Find a Grave user would run into this issue themselves, going to add in a memorial of a loved one only to find out that some stranger had already added in that memorial before you even had a chance. And for some folks that this happened to, they would reach out to the person that created the memorial, try to get the management transferred over, which is something Find a Grave has as part of their system, and then the user who added the memorial is very difficult and won't give up that transfer so easily. Basically, some of these users became so obsessed with the numbers that they didn't want to give up any of the memorials that they had done or created because it meant that their numbers were gonna go down. And after a while, this actually became the stereotype of hardcore users on Find a Grave, and I like to call these types of users the body counters. Because in a sense, that's really what they are. They're just trying to be the one that counts the most bodies. And so for the rest of this video, that's how I'm going to refer to these users. Now, this isn't to say that all Find a Grave users are body counters. In fact, I would say that it's a very, very small percentage of Find a Grave users who would fall under this category of body counters. In my own experience, I've dealt with a lot of amazing people on Find a Grave who have gone well above and beyond just going to photograph graves. They'll sometimes go and even find other graves of your family members in the same cemetery, take the photos. A lot of people who are really, really quick to transfer memorials if you do ask for it. And a lot of users who are just very friendly and very willing to help. But unfortunately, sometimes the negative can overshadow the positive, which is becoming the case with Find a Grave. As time progressed, issues with body counters became more and more common for people within the genealogy community, and it even affected some of the well-known genealogists in our community. Amy Johnson Crow, who has been a very well-known figure within the genealogy community for years, ran into this issue herself in 2016 after her father-in-law passed away. So I spoke to Amy about her experiences.
Hi, I'm Amy Johnson Crow. I have had a genealogy blog for really more years than I really want to admit to. I've been in the genealogy space for a long time as a speaker and as an educator. So I started with Find a Grave as a user and was using it at first, of course, to try to find people. I was active in helping find requests, when people would put in a request to have their ancestors' grave photographed and things like that. So I was doing a lot of that. Eventually, my career led me to actually working at Ancestry. And one of the things that I was responsible for a while was actually Find a Grave social media. Then I left Ancestry and struck out on my own as a genealogy educator, was still using the site because it does have such a tremendous amount of information there. And then had a rather unpleasant experience. So in 2016, my father-in-law died very unexpectedly. My in-laws live about 45 minutes from where I live. And when we got the call late that Friday evening, it took us a little while to get down there. Obviously, it was such a shock. It was something that he had not been ill. He had not been in the hospital. He actually died at home. From my previous experience, I knew that people would watch newspaper websites and that they would create Find a Grave memorials based upon what appeared in the obit column, either in print or on the newspaper website. So I knew going into this that I needed to create my father-in-law's memorial, his Find a Grave memorial, before somebody else did. That was something that I wanted to do for the family. We met with the funeral home director Saturday morning. And again, the funeral home director is just about an hour from us. We get everything prepared for the service. We write the obituary. We give all the paperwork to the funeral home director. He's going to take care of placing the obituary on the website and submitting it to the newspaper. It wasn't going to run in the paper until Monday. We get home. So this is, we get home probably about 2 hours after the meeting ended. That afternoon, I thought, I'm going to go ahead and create the memorial now. I logged into Find a Grave and someone had already created his memorial. And I thought that I was doing well by taking care of it before it was in the newspaper. I didn't realize that people were actually keeping an eye on their local funeral home websites and pulling it off of there. That is the only place that at that time that his obituary was online, was on the funeral home website. And so they had actually created the memorial before I even got home.
You wrote the blog post and you actually had a couple of suggestions in there of what they could do at Find a Grave. Could you talk about your suggestions?
One suggestion was to put into place some sort of mechanism that either there would be a waiting period after the person's death, that either it wouldn't appear online at all, or that there would be just limited information if you weren't a close family member. The other thing that I suggested was to remove the count, remove the numbers, because you can go onto anybody's Find a Grave profile and see how many memorials they've created, how many memorials they manage, how many photographs they've added. For some people, and I do want to be clear, this is not the majority of Find a Grave users, okay? But there are some people who are very motivated by those numbers. So that was one of the things that I had suggested back in 2016, was to remove the numbers from everyone's profile, both public and private.
While her blog post gained traction, there was nothing done at Find a Grave to curb these issues.
In fact, my dad died almost 2 years ago. And I knew that if a family member was going to be the person to create Dad's memorial, we needed to do it before we met with anyone. So one of the very first things I did after my dad died was create his Find a Grave memorial. I was not ready to do that. And I was very careful about what I put into his memorial. You know, I put the bare facts, I put the cemetery where he was going to be buried. At that point, we hadn't even met with the funeral home director to make the arrangements, but wanted to get that information in there so that he would have a memorial before someone else did. I was shocked, gobsmacked, whatever the right word is, to discover a few weeks later and discovered that somebody had actually grabbed Dad's photo off of the funeral home website and added it as a photo on his memorial, the one that I created. It was a photo that the family specifically chose for Dad's online obituary. If the family had wanted it on his Find a Grave memorial, we would have added it. I did contact the person and informed him or her of that, hey, you know, I'm the one who created the memorial. I have that photo. I'm the one who gave that photo to the funeral home. And that if the family had wanted his picture on his Find a Grave memorial, we would have added it, asked the person to remove it, and they did. I will give them credit. They did take it down very quickly. However, when I reached out to Find a Grave about it, they said that it came down to the copyright holder. Well, in this case, the family was the copyright holder. So if the person had refused to have taken it down, then Find a Grave would have stepped in. But any other cases, if the family had not had the copyright, Find a Grave, their position is the copyright holder has to be the one to ask for it to be removed.
And as time went on, more and more people found themselves experiencing the exact same thing. And it started to become even more commonplace to see more blog posts from well-known genealogists. One of them being Judy Russell, the legal genealogist, who in 2019 started to call out these practices from Find a Grave and saying that they needed to do something to change them. In 2021, Daniel Loftus, a young Irish genealogist, decided to also call out Find a Grave for the unethical practices being done by the users of the website. So I spoke to Daniel about his efforts to get things changed at Find a Grave and the responses he's received from the website.
Hi, I'm Daniel Loftus. I am the founder of Daniel's Genealogy and also the co-founder of The Hidden Branch, which is a place for young genealogists to connect and engage with each other. I guess kind of when I started kind of looking into Find a Grave, you know, I was after helping a couple of friends with their family history and kind of looking through hints, and these relatives were quite close. You had one that was an aunt and the other were parents of two of my friends that were on Find a Grave, and it didn't really have a very positive reaction. They just kind of thought, okay, this is cool, and then it suddenly went like, okay, but a volunteer, you know, is controlling my relatives or my parents, my aunt's memorial. My kind of initial tweet to Find a Grave was talking about just my reaction to seeing this. That was last August, and then I went trying to Find a Grave to try and talk about this, and I eventually met with someone from Find a Grave in I think it was like a day or two after. It kind of brought up the possibility of a moratorium, because that was the consensus of people that I'd interacted with, kind of voicing their concerns as well as my own.
And in January of this year, 2022, there was an update from Find a Grave.
Find a Grave did put something into place where if you are not who they consider a close relative, if the death occurred within 30 days, Only limited information would show on the website. And if you are a close relative, you can click through and you can actually have that memorial transferred to you. You don't even have to contact the memorial creator. It's just automatic in those first 30 days.
Yet this update was not enough. And after the Uvalde shooting on May 24th, 2022, memorials for the victims were quickly created right after their names were announced, before anyone even knew where they were going to be buried.
I just had a sinking feeling from seeing all the news that potentially that they might be up there. So I went and I looked, and lo and behold, within about 48 hours, every victim had been added to Find a Graves database after this shooting.
A person not related to any of the families, that they had created memorials for all of the victims of the massacre, had created it basically as soon as the names were released to the public.
Didn't know what else to say, so I just tweeted out saying something along the lines of, I was stunned that, every victim of Uvalde has been added to Find a Grave within 48 hours or 48 hours. These victims hadn't been buried yet, and yet they were having an online memorial being created for them for a grave that isn't existent as of yet. It just felt insensitive to do it this soon.
It just seems so egregious that somebody had done this. And we also discovered at that time that limited view that Find a Grave said that they had put in place, it was only in place on the website. It was not in place on the Find a Grave app.
Many in the genealogy community found this act unethical and quite disgusting, with many genealogists calling out Find a Grave and Ancestry for failing to take any sort of action, which is something many genealogists had called for in previous years. Many genealogists reached out personally to Find a Grave, seeking answers and communication to right this wrong. Amy and Daniel were both among the people who had reached out to Find a Grave, but both received quite similar responses.
I think it was the day after that I got an email from I think it was a community manager of Find a Grave. They sent out this piece, and I think it was sent to, most people who contacted them about this.
Their response that they sent to everyone who contacted them, it was obviously a canned response. The
response is just kind of saying, we are mindful of what happened in Uvalde. We're trying as a site to improve kind of how we deal with memorials of high profile cases like this. I think a lot of people, weren't really happy with the response. Some people felt that, it didn't really indicate that anything was planning to be done.
The line that got me in the email response that I got was saying that Find a Grave was trying to balance all of the uses for the various members of the community, and that we should remember that all of the memorials are created out of a place of love and caring. Really? I didn't really feel love and caring in 2016 when a random person created my father-in-law's memorial, and I certainly didn't feel love and caring in 2020 when somebody literally scraped my dad's photo off of the funeral home website.
So what can be done to stop these issues with the body counters?
My original suggestion back in 2016, they kind of went with that for a period of time, and right now it's 30 days, that for that limited time, that there would just be that limited information that would appear. And my understanding is, and I haven't looked it up on the app, but my understanding is they have finally updated the app that it also has the limited information. That being said, I think that time needs to be increased. Right now, I think it should be at least a minimum of 90 days, preferably 180. And I know that people have said, well, Amy, there isn't any sort of validation or any sort of verification that this is a close relative. Find a Grave could put some sort of mechanism in the background that, and they might have already, I don't know, but it would be easy enough to implement since part of the workflow when you're adding a new memorial is they ask, are you a close family member? Then they could be flagging, okay, this person has said that they're a close family member for 75 people in the last month. So I think that putting some sort of guardrails on that would help as well.
People will say that's too much, and other people will say, oh, but that's not too much at all. But I think if we can find something that meets in the middle, it'd be great. We call it Find a Grave. Logically, wouldn't you think that there'd be a grave before there's a memorial? I get you could have like a pre-marker or something, but there wouldn't be a headstone 24 to 48 hours or a week after a death occurs. Logically, you would have thought that this shouldn't even be added in, but unfortunately, this is the reality.
For anyone who would like to help bring change to Find a Grave, be sure to follow the links for the petitions on change.com and share this video. Find a Grave is an extremely useful website, and I've used it a whole bunch in my own research. When I was tracing out the family tree for Mr. B, I was able to use Find a Grave to learn a whole lot about the story of his family during the Civil War. And if you'd like to see how I did that, be sure to watch this video right here. Thank you to my patrons, and especially Tanae Summers, Catherine Dulles, Heather Blakely, John Gilchrist, and Suzanne O'Connor.